I've spent most of my life in motion, always building, fixing, pushing, moving from one impossible problem to the next. From the outside, it probably looks full, loud, successful. But motion has a strange way of hiding absence. When you're always chasing the next breakthrough, the next deadline, the next version of the future, you don't always notice what's missing. You just keep going. There were years when progress became a kind of shield. Achievement filled the calendar, ambition filled the mind, and purpose filled the conversation. Yet beneath all that movement, there was a quiet gap. Not failure, not confusion, just this sense that something essential hadn't arrived yet, something that didn't care about scale or speed, something human. You can surround yourself with brilliance and still feel alone. You can be understood for what you do, but not for who you are. And when your life runs at high intensity, it's easy to accept that as the price of building big things. You tell yourself it's temporary, that it will make sense later. That meaning will catch up, but absence doesn't announce itself. It waits, patient, silent, and it shows up in the moments when the noise fades, late nights, long flights, quiet rooms, when there's nothing left to optimize or solve. Just you and the question you've been avoiding. I didn't stop moving because something was missing. I kept moving until I realized motion alone wasn't the answer. Some things don't arrive through force or speed. They arrive through time. And sometimes a lifetime of motion is just preparation for recognizing what truly matters when it finally appears. Success has a way of convincing you that it's enough, that if you just reach the next milestone, solve the next problem, hit the next impossible target, everything will fall into place. And for a while, it works. Achievement brings momentum. Momentum brings validation, and validation can be mistaken for meaning. But success multiplies things. It multiplies pressure, expectations, responsibility, and distance. What it doesn't automatically multiply is fulfillment. You can win big and still feel something quietly unresolved. You can accomplish what most people only imagine and still wonder why it doesn't fully land. That realization can be uncomfortable, especially in a world that tells you success is the finish line. There were moments when I thought meaning would show up eventually like a delayed reward. That, if I kept pushing forward, it would catch up. But meaning doesn't arrive on a schedule. It doesn't respond to scale. It shows up in connection, in being known without performing, understood without explaining, valued without producing. When everything around you measures output, it's easy to forget that humans aren't projects. You don't optimize your way into fulfillment. You don't engineer it through intensity. Meaning comes from something quieter and far more rare, a bond that doesn't ask what you've built, only who you are when you stop building. Success can open doors, but it can't tell you which ones matter. It can give you options, but it can't tell you where you belong. That part is personal, and until you experience it, no amount of achievement fills that space. Because at some point, you realize that success is powerful, but meaning is what makes it worth carrying. You meet a lot of people along the way, smart people, talented people, people who admire what you build, what you represent, what you're trying to change. They see the vision, the momentum, the intensity, and that matters. It fuels progress. But it's not the same as being seen. Being seen is rare. It's when someone looks past the ambition and doesn't get distracted by the scale. They don't reduce you to results or headlines. They notice the weight behind the decisions, the doubt behind the confidence, the human cost behind the drive. They understand that the intensity isn't ego, it's responsibility. Most people interact with the surface. They respond to the version of you that's moving fast, speaking clearly, pushing forward. And that's fine, that's part of the role. But very few are willing or able to sit with the parts that aren't polished, the pauses, the questions, the moments when certainty fades and you're just trying to do the right thing without a roadmap. When someone truly sees you, there's no performance required. You don't have to explain why the pressure exists or justify the obsession with the future. They already understand. Not because they agree with everything, but because they're paying attention to the person carrying it all. That kind of connection doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It feels steady, familiar, almost disarming. And once you experience it, you realize how different it is from admiration or approval. It's grounding in a way nothing else is. Many people may cross your path, but only one has the ability to see you clearly and change everything because of it. Waiting doesn't always look the way people imagine. It's not passive. It's not quiet on the inside. Sometimes waiting is building entire worlds while feeling misunderstood in your own. It's being surrounded by noise and still feeling alone. It's knowing what you're aiming for in the future, but not knowing who's meant to stand beside you while you get there. There were long stretches where solitude became familiar, not because I wanted distance, but because connection at that level is rare. When your life moves fast and your thinking runs deep, not everyone can or wants to keep pace. And that can lead to being misread. People fill in the gaps with assumptions. They project motives, simplify complexity, reduce intention to personality. You learn to live with that. Patience in that space becomes a discipline. You keep going even when you're not fully understood. You keep choosing purpose even when connection feels delayed. You accept that timing matters and forcing alignment never works. The right things don't respond to pressure, they respond to readiness. There were moments when it would have been easy to settle, to choose familiarity over fit, to quiet the waiting by convincing myself that close enough was enough. But something always pushed back. A sense that the connection I was waiting for couldn't be rushed, and that compromising there would cost more than being alone, so I kept moving forward, carrying both ambition and uncertainty at the same time, trusting that misunderstanding was temporary. That solitude wasn't a verdict, just a phase. That some things require endurance before they reveal their purpose. Because waiting, when done honestly, isn't about lack, it's about belief. Belief that the right connection is worth the time, the silence, and the patience it demands. And some things only make sense after you've waited long enough to recognize them when they finally arrive. There's a moment that's hard to explain unless you've lived it. The moment when everything suddenly lines up without force. No chasing, no convincing, no second guessing, just recognition. It's quiet, almost ordinary on the surface, but internally it's unmistakable. You realize that the tension you've been carrying for years starts to loosen, and for the first time, things don't feel like they're fighting each other. Before that moment, life feels fragmented. You're successful in one direction, fulfilled in another, driven here, empty there. You manage it, you compensate, you tell yourself that's just how it is when you're building something big. But when alignment happens, you see the pattern clearly. You understand why certain connections never lasted, why timing was always off, why things that looked right never felt right. It's not about perfection. It's about fit, the kind that doesn't require translation, the kind where ambition doesn't need to be defended and intensity doesn't need to be explained. Instead of pulling you in different directions, everything starts moving on the same axis. Your work feels clearer, your decisions feel lighter, even the pressure feels different, less chaotic, more intentional. What surprises you most is how much energy was being spent just holding things together. When alignment arrives, that energy comes back. You're not divided anymore. You're not negotiating between who you are and what you're building. You're finally operating as one system. And in that clarity, the past reframes itself. The waiting, the solitude, the near misses, they stop feeling like delays and start looking like preparation. You don't resent the time anymore. You respect it. Because when the right connection appears, you don't wonder if it's real. You just know why nothing else ever worked before. After everything, the motion, the waiting, the misalignment, the patience, you realize the journey was never just about building things. It was about finding the one presence that made the journey make sense. Not someone who pulled you away from purpose, but someone who gave it dimension. Someone who didn't ask you to choose between ambition and connection, because with them there was no conflict for a long time. The path felt solitary, not empty, just singular, focused. You tell yourself that's the cost of doing meaningful work, and maybe it is for a while, but eventually you understand that even the most driven life isn't meant to be carried alone. Not because you need support to keep going, but because sharing the weight changes what the weight means. The right person doesn't slow you down. They don't soften your edge or dilute your vision. They remind you why the vision matters in the first place. They make the wins feel real and the losses survivable. They don't compete with the mission, they humanize it. Suddenly, the future you're building isn't just an abstract goal. It has a heartbeat. What's remarkable is how everything sharpens when that connection exists. Decisions feel cleaner. Risk feels purposeful. Even uncertainty feels less heavy because you're no longer facing it in isolation. You're still moving forward with intensity, but now there's meaning attached to every step. You realize that waiting wasn't wasted time. It was the cost of finding something that couldn't be rushed, something that didn't show up when it was convenient, but when it was right. And in that realization, gratitude replaces impatience. Because some journeys are about what you build, but the ones that matter most are about who you find along the way. And some connections are worth an entire lifetime of waiting.